Let's take a look at this chart. I explained it in my previous reminder about OAuth 2.0. You can watch it for better understanding. Basically, this chart is all about OAuth 2.0 protocol. The OpenID Connect is just a small part of OAuth flow. It is an identity layer on top of OAuth. It allows clients to verify the identity of the end user based on the authentication performed by an authorization server, as well as to obtain basic profile information about the end user in a REST-like manner. You can configure an authentication provider for any third party that implements the server side of the OpenID Connect protocol. Here are some common OpenID providers: Amazon, Google, PayPal. Salesforce can also be an OpenID provider. Heroku has a very nice app that shows us an OpenID Connect in action. I don't know who made it, but it is very handy. First step, we have to access Salesforce org using Connected App. App Manager, Connected App that I created in Reminder about OAuth. Consumer key is a client ID. Consumer secret is a client secret. We need this callback URL to send info back to the Heroku app. Let's wait a little bit. Sorry, I forgot to do one more thing. I must add OpenID scope and configure it. Salesforce is an authentication provider in this case, so we will add login endpoint to this field. Allow access. Heroku sends GET request to the Salesforce login endpoint with the consumer key, which is the public key, and additional information including redirect URI and response type for callback, code in this case. We allowed access, so response includes authorization grant. In the next step, Heroku sends this grant to Salesforce again, plus consumer key and consumer secret, and receives access token and ID token. On the left side, we can see decrypted ID token with additional info about the user. In the step 4, Heroku sends request to the user info URL using access token and receives complete info about the user. In this example, we will connect two Salesforce orgs using OpenID Connect. Mindful Fox will be the org we want to grab data from. Let's call it org 1. And the Creative Panda will be the org which tries to access this data. Let's call it org 2. So in auth provider of org 2, we should select Salesforce as an authentication provider. Add consumer key and consumer secret from connected app of org 1, which as I said was already created in the reminder about OAuth 2.0. Scope should be full and OpenID. Next, in the org 2, you should create name credentials with any name you like. We need org-specific subdomain of org 1 and we can grab it from org 1 company settings, my domain. Authentication protocol OAuth 2.0 because OpenID Connect is a layer on top of OAuth. Scope full and OpenID. Authentication provider is an auth provider label from org 2. Well, not so fast. I forgot to add callback URL from auth provider of org 2 to the connected app of org 1. Let's wait a little again. Open name credentials in org2 and resave it to start authentication flow because we activated this option using checkbox. The prompt asks us to enter credentials of org1, which is Mindful Fox. Oops. I forgot another thing. I have to provide refresh token scope. First go to the connected app of the org1 and add refresh token scope. Let's wait. Then in name credentials of org2, add the same refresh token scope. Resave. Enter credentials of org1 to the prompt. The error is gone. Now let's actually grab the data from org1. Create new project in VS Code. Under the classes folder, create Apex file with any name. Let's copy this code snippet to speed up. Replace the label of name credentials. I prepared this endpoint beforehand. We have to authorize the org2 to be able to run the code and access org1, so enter credentials of org2. Now resave named credentials in org2 to gain access to org1. Enter credentials of org1. So let's run our code. Oops. You don't have permission to view this data. Really? Okay, let's open the user. Under Authentication Settings for External Systems, add the active user. I think other settings are good. Save. Open the named credentials of org2 again. Resave it. Enter credentials of work 1. Run the code. Congrats, we have a lot of accounts, right? That's it.